June 14th, 1940, Porte de la Villette, northeastern edge of Paris. The fog hangs low over the cobblestones, thick enough to taste. Boots strike stone, slow, deliberate, unnervingly loud in the empty streets. Somewhere a church bell should be ringing. It doesn't. Paris, the city of lights, fell without a shot, and German generals were stunned. A motorcycle engine idles, then cuts. The sound echoes longer than it should. A lieutenant raises his hand. The column halts. Steel helmets tilt upward, as if the city itself might suddenly speak. It doesn't. White flags hang from windows. Some are bedsheets, hastily torn. Others are tablecloths, embroidered, delicate. They flutter like surrendering ghosts. The tricolor of France is gone, lowered in the night, not burned, not captured, simply removed. General Dietrich von Choltitz is not here yet, neither is von Rundstedt. This first wave belongs to the men of the 18th Army, advancing under orders they barely believe. Paris was supposed to fight. Paris was supposed to burn. Instead, Paris is holding its breath. You can almost feel it, the weight of expectation pressing down on the men marching forward. Weeks of blitzkrieg have taught them to expect ambushes behind every corner, snipers in attics, barricades, booby traps. This is the capital of nearly 3 million people. This is not supposed to be easy. A German captain pauses at an intersection and scans the boulevard ahead. Café chairs are stacked neatly inside. A newspaper lies abandoned on a kiosk, headline already outdated. L'armée se battra. The army will fight. It didn't. At 6 a.m., the order is confirmed. Paris est ville ouverte. Paris is an open city. No defense, no resistance. For a moment, no one moves. The men had rehearsed this march in their heads, machine guns chattering, shells falling, smoke rising from the Seine. Some had written letters the night before, hands shaking, convinced they would die in the streets of Paris. Others were certain this would be their greatest battle yet. Now there is only the sound of boots. Far behind the front lines, in a stabroom thick with cigarette smoke and maps pinned to corkboards, General Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, is receiving reports. The phone rings. He listens, says nothing. Then quietly, "No resistance?" The officer on the other end confirms it. French forces have withdrawn. The government fled days earlier. The roads south were clogged with refugees, families dragging mattresses, bird cages, mirrors, anything they could carry. Paris has been emptied of its defenders. Halder sets the receiver down slowly.
This was not the plan. German generals had spent years studying Paris as a fortress. The Marne, the ring roads, the bridges over the Seine are natural choke points. In war games, the city was a nightmare scenario, one that would bleed divisions white. Hitler himself had warned of the political risk of destroying Paris, but no one believed the French would simply give it up. And yet, at Army Group A headquarters, General Gerd von Rundstedt stands over a map, tracing the German advance with his finger. His chief of staff reads the message aloud again, as if repetition might change its meaning. No organized resistance. City surrendered intact. Rundstedt exhales through his nose, a long, skeptical breath. Intact, he repeats. Paris? He had fought in the First World War. He had seen Verdun. He knew what a cornered nation could do when its back was against the wall. The French army, whatever its mistakes, was not cowardly. Not this. Not the guardians of Paris. Something feels wrong. Out in the city, German officers begin to realize the scale of what is happening. They pass monuments they know only from postcards, the Arc de Triomphe looming through the mist, the Champs-Élysées stretching wide and empty like a parade ground prepared just for them. A young major removes his gloves and runs a hand along the cold stone of a building facade. No bullet scars, no fire damage, just age, history, and silence. "This is madness," he mutters. At the Hôtel de Ville, a German detachment advances cautiously, weapons raised. The doors are unlocked. Inside, papers are stacked neatly, desks cleared. The French municipal administration left behind a city ready to be occupied, not defended. Somewhere near the Seine, a German engineer officer pauses on a bridge, peering down at the water. He had expected explosives, wires, charges, a dead man's switch. Instead, the bridge stands untouched. "Not even a fuse," he says, disbelief creeping into his voice. By mid-morning, the news has spread through the ranks. Paris has fallen. Not after a siege, not after a battle, without a fight. The reaction among German generals is not triumphant, at least at first. It is confusion, suspicion, even disappointment.
General Erich von Manstein, architect of the breakthrough through the Ardennes, later admitted that he had expected heavy street fighting and enormous losses. Others echoed the sentiment in private diaries and post-war interrogations. They had prepared themselves mentally for destruction on an unimaginable scale. Instead, they were walking through a museum. At 10:15 a.m., a German staff car pulls up near the Eiffel Tower. An officer steps out, adjusts his cap, and looks up. The iron lattice rises into the gray sky, untouched. No smoke, no flames. A photographer snaps a picture. Somewhere deep inside the German high command, a dangerous thought begins to form. If Paris can fall like this, what else is possible? But even as that thought takes shape, unease follows close behind. Victory this easy feels undeserved, fragile, as if the city might wake up at any moment and realize what it has allowed. Hitler himself is not in Paris. He will come later to tour the conquered capital in the early hours of dawn, posing for photographs that will be seen around the world. But on this morning, the generals on the ground are the ones facing the reality of it, and they don't know how to feel. One colonel writes in his notebook, "We expected ruins. Instead, we found silence." Another officer, standing on a balcony overlooking the Place de la Concorde, watches a lone Parisian cross the square, head down, refusing to look at the occupiers. The man's footsteps echo. Each one sounds like an accusation. The German officer feels a flicker of something he cannot name. It is not pride, it is not relief, it is dread. Because if Paris did not fight, then why did it surrender? And what does that say about the war that is only just beginning? As the German flag is raised over government buildings and orders are issued to preserve the city at all costs, the generals begin to understand that this victory carries a weight unlike any other. Paris is not just a city, it is a symbol. And symbols, once taken, have consequences. Consequences no one fully understands yet. The city keeps breathing. That is what surprises them most. By noon, German sentries stand at major intersections, rifles slung, posture rigid, yet Paris does not erupt. No riots, no hidden gunfire, no desperate last stand. Instead, shutters creak open an inch at a time. Faces appear, pale and tight, watching history pass beneath their windows. General von Rundstedt arrives on the outskirts in the early afternoon. His staff car slows as it enters the city proper. He leans forward, eyes scanning rooftops, doorways, balconies, every place a rifle could be hidden. Nothing. The silence presses harder than artillery ever could. You feel as though you've walked onto a stage after the actors have fled, one officer later recalls. The props are all there, the play is gone. Rundstedt says little as the car rolls past the Arc de Triomphe. He removes his gloves, folds them carefully, and rests his hands on his cane, a habit from another war, another Paris. In 1918, Germany had dreamed of this city and failed to take it. Now, 22 years later, it lies open before him. Too open. At headquarters, reports continue to arrive. Bridges secured, ministries occupied, rail hubs intact, no sabotage, no traps. The French army has vanished south, leaving behind only rumor and bitterness. General Georg von Küchler, commander of the 18th Army, reads through the situation update twice. He circles one line with his pencil. No destruction of infrastructure. He looks up. You gave us everything? His adjutant nods, uncertain. Yes, Herr General. Küchler frowns. In military logic, gifts like this are never free. Across the city, junior officers experience the same unease in smaller, more personal ways. A lieutenant posts guards outside the Louvre, half expecting an explosion. Instead, a museum curator approaches him, stiff-backed, hands trembling slightly, as he presents a typed inventory of the building. Please, the man says in careful German, the artworks have been evacuated. The building is empty. The lieutenant takes the paper, unsure what to do with it. He had trained for combat, not custody. You may go, he finally says. The curator hesitates, then turns away, shoulders hunched, not in defeat, but in mourning. By late afternoon, the German command begins issuing unusual orders. No looting, no unnecessary movement, no firing. The city is to be preserved. These are not humanitarian instincts, they are strategic. Paris is worth more intact than destroyed, politically, culturally, psychologically. But the generals sense something else beneath the logic.
This victory is watching them. At the Army High Command, Franz Halder opens his diary that evening. He writes with uncharacteristic hesitation. Paris was taken without resistance. One cannot escape the feeling that something fundamental has broken on the enemy's side. Broken, not beaten. Halder knows the difference. He remembers the briefings from before the campaign, the French army entrenched behind the Maginot Line, confident in static defense. He remembers how wrong everyone had been, the Ardennes gamble, the rapid encirclement, the collapse that followed. Still, Paris was supposed to be different. Capitals fight, capitals burn, capitals make history with blood. This one surrendered itself whole. At 7 p.m., as the sun dips low and shadows stretch across the Seine, a German general staff officer walks along the riverbank. He watches the water move under the bridges his men had been prepared to die crossing. He lights a cigarette. The flame flickers in the breeze. Why didn't they blow them? He asks no one. Nearby, a Frenchwoman stands with her back to the river, arms folded tight against her coat. She stares straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the uniform only meters away. The officer feels a strange urge to speak, to say something conciliatory, something human. He doesn't. He exhales smoke instead. This is not how conquest is supposed to feel. That night, German officers gather in commandeered apartments and hotels. Crystal chandeliers hang above field gray uniforms. Velvet curtains absorb whispered conversations. The mood is subdued. Some drink, some don't. A few younger officers are giddy, already imagining leave in a conquered capital, letters home filled with disbelief. But among the senior men, the tone is different. General Günther Blumentritt, Rundstedt's chief of staff, listens more than he speaks. He hears the same phrase repeated in different forms.
It was too easy. They let it have it. They must be planning something.
Blumentritt scribbles notes. He will later write that the fall of Paris created more questions than answers within the high command. Questions like, had France truly collapsed or merely stepped aside? In Berlin, Hitler receives the news with elation. Paris is his obsession, his proof, his stage. He orders plans made immediately for a visit. The photographs must be perfect. The message is unmistakable. But even as the Führer celebrates, his generals hesitate to share his triumphalism. They have seen the city, and they have seen the people. On June 15, General von Manstein visits several command posts throughout Paris. He inspects positions, speaks to officers, listens. Everywhere the same report: quiet streets, quiet civilians, obedience without enthusiasm. Manstein pauses at one point, looking out over a wide boulevard lined with plane trees. "This is not submission," he says quietly. "This is restraint." His aide blinks. "Sir?" Manstein doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. He has spent his life studying enemies, how they break, how they endure. France has endured something here. That realization spreads slowly through the German officer corps. In mess halls and map rooms, conversations shift. Less talk of victory parades, more talk of occupation logistics, security, control. Because holding a city like Paris is not the same as taking it. The city resists in ways that do not involve guns. On June 16, German militia police report a surge in minor incidents: stairs held too long, instructions followed too precisely, civilians stepping aside at the last possible moment. A captain writes in his report, "The population is outwardly compliant, inwardly hostile." Rundstedt reads it and nods once. "Yes," he says, "that is what I thought." Meanwhile, intelligence officers begin intercepting rumors: French officers regrouping in the south, a new government forming, a general named de Gaulle broadcasting defiance from London. Nothing immediate, nothing concrete, but enough. Enough to make the generals reconsider the meaning of June 14. One evening, as dusk settles over the city, von Küchler stands on a balcony overlooking Paris. Lights flicker on, soft, yellow, stubbornly normal. He turns to his aide. "They've given us their city, but not their war." The aide says nothing. This victory is watching them. At the Army High Command, Franz Halder opens his diary that evening. He writes with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Paris was taken without resistance. One cannot escape the feeling that something fundamental has broken on the enemy's side." Broken, not beaten. Halder knows the difference. He remembers the briefings from before the campaign, the French army entrenched behind the Maginot Line, confident in static defense. He remembers how wrong everyone had been: the Ardennes gamble, the rapid encirclement, the collapse that followed. Still, Paris was supposed to be different. Capitals fight, capitals burn, capitals make history with blood. This one surrendered itself whole. At 7 p.m., as the sun dips low and shadows stretch across the Seine, a German general staff officer walks along the riverbank. He watches the water move under the bridges his men had been prepared to die crossing. He lights a cigarette. The flame flickers in the breeze. Why didn't they blow them? He asks no one. Nearby, a Frenchwoman stands with her back to the river, arms folded tight against her coat. She stares straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the uniform only meters away. The officer feels a strange urge to speak, to say something conciliatory, something human. He doesn't. He exhales smoke instead. This is not how conquest is supposed to feel. That night, German officers gather in commandeered apartments and hotels.
Crystal chandeliers hang above field gray uniforms. Velvet curtains absorb whispered conversations. The mood is subdued. Some drink, some don't. A few younger officers are giddy, already imagining leave in a conquered capital, letters home filled with disbelief. But among the senior men, the tone is different. General Gunther Blumentritt, Rundstedt's chief of staff, listens more than he speaks. He hears the same phrase repeated in different forms. It was too easy. They let it have it. They must be planning something.
Blumentritt scribbles notes. He will later write that the fall of Paris created more questions than answers within the high command. Questions like, had France truly collapsed or merely stepped aside? In Berlin, Hitler receives the news with elation. Paris is his obsession, his proof, his stage. He orders plans made immediately for a visit. The photographs must be perfect. The message is unmistakable. But even as the Führer celebrates, his generals hesitate to share his triumphalism. They have seen the city, and they have seen the people. On June 15, General von Manstein visits several command posts throughout Paris. He inspects positions, speaks to officers, listens. Everywhere the same report: quiet streets, quiet civilians, obedience without enthusiasm. Manstein pauses at one point, looking out over a wide boulevard lined with plane trees. "This is not submission," he says quietly. "This is restraint." His aide blinks. "Sir?" Manstein doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. He has spent his life studying enemies, how they break, how they endure. France has endured something here. That realization spreads slowly through the German officer corps. In mess halls and map rooms, conversations shift. Less talk of victory parades, more talk of occupation logistics, security, control. Because holding a city like Paris is not the same as taking it. The city resists in ways that do not involve guns. On June 16, German militia police report a surge in minor incidents: stairs held too long, instructions followed too precisely, civilians stepping aside at the last possible moment. A captain writes in his report, "The population is outwardly compliant, inwardly hostile." Rundstedt reads it and nods once. "Yes," he says, "that is what I thought." Meanwhile, intelligence officers begin intercepting rumors. French officers regrouping in the south, a new government forming, a general named de Gaulle broadcasting defiance from London. Nothing immediate, nothing concrete, but enough. Enough to make the generals reconsider the meaning of June 14. One evening, as dusk settles over the city, von Küchler stands on a balcony overlooking Paris. Lights flicker on, soft, yellow, stubbornly normal. He turns to his aide. "They've given us their city, but not their war." The aide says nothing. Because outside, somewhere in the quiet streets below, Paris is already beginning to remember itself. And the German generals, for all their maps and medals, are starting to realize that this bloodless victory may cost them more than any battle ever could. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. And when it does, it will not be announced with gunfire. It will come quietly, like a city that never truly surrendered. The doors close, the room tightens. June 17, 1940, a former French ministry building near the Place Vendôme, now repurposed as German headquarters. Heavy curtains block the afternoon light. Maps of northern France cover the walls, edges curling where French pins have been ripped out and replaced with German ones. This is where the tone changes. No photographers, no salutes, just men who have survived too many wars to be fooled by a quiet one. General Gerd von Rundstedt takes his seat at the long table. He removes his cap and sets it carefully beside him.
Around him sit Blumentritt, Küchler, and several corps commanders, faces drawn, eyes sharp. A pot of coffee steams in the center, untouched. Rundstedt clears his throat. "Gentlemen," he says, "Paris has fallen. Officially, this is a triumph." He pauses. No one here believes that. Silence answers him. Not disagreement, but relief. Finally, someone has said it out loud. Blumentritt speaks first. "The French abandoned the city deliberately, to preserve it, to deny us the propaganda of destruction." Or, Küchler adds, "to shift the burden onto us." Heads turn. Küchler leans forward, voice low. "We now must feed it, police it, protect it, every street, every bridge. They have turned Paris into an anchor around our necks." No one argues. A corps commander flips open his notebook. "My officers report the same thing everywhere. Civilians who obey but do not cooperate. They give directions but are always late. They answer questions but never fully." Rundstedt nods. Passive resistance. He taps the table with one finger, slow, rhythmic. "We expected barricades. Instead, we have a city that watches us and a city that waits." The phrase hangs in the air.
Later, in private, Blumentritt will describe that meeting as the moment when the illusion of easy victory finally died. Because now, the generals are no longer talking about how Paris fell. They are talking about what Paris means. In another building across the city, General Erich von Manstein conducts his own, quieter assessment. He stands by a window overlooking a narrow street, watching German patrols move in pairs. "They gave us the city to save it," he says to his aide, "but also to judge us." The aide looks confused. "Judge us, sir?" Manstein turns. His expression is calm, analytical, the face of a man who thinks in maneuvers and consequences. "If Paris burns under our watch, the world will blame us," he says. "If Paris starves, the world will blame us. And if Paris resists slowly, quietly," he trails off. The aide swallows. "Yes, sir." That same evening, Franz Halder received a detailed situation report from Paris. He reads it alone, late at night, desk lamp casting sharp shadows across the room. He underlines a single sentence. "The absence of resistance is creating uncertainty among officers." Uncertainty. That is not a word commanders like to see. Halder closes the folder and opens his diary again. "It is a strange thing. We have taken the enemy's heart, yet it does not beat for us." Elsewhere in the city, junior officers overhear fragments of these higher-level anxieties without fully understanding them. A major at the École Militaire tells a captain, half joking, "I'd rather they had shot at us. At least then we'd know where we stand." The captain laughs, then stops, because he knows exactly what the major means. The absence of violence creates its own pressure. Every open window feels like an eye. Every quiet street is like a held breath. German sentries begin reporting unusual behavior. Parisians who pause at the sound of boots, then continue as if nothing happened. Shopkeepers who open precisely at the posted hour, close precisely at closing time, and never a minute more. Order without warmth. General von Küchler reads one such report and mutters, "They are teaching us patience." He does not sound amused. The generals begin to speak more openly among themselves, not in proclamations, but in private remarks, statements that will later surface in memoirs and interrogations. "We did not conquer Paris," one general says years later. "Paris allowed itself to be occupied." Another admits, "The lack of resistance unsettled us more than a battle would have." These are not boasts, they're confessions, because every experienced commander understands one truth: an enemy who chooses when not to fight is far more dangerous than one who cannot. On June 18th, Hitler made his famous dawn visit to Paris. He stands before the Eiffel Tower, gazes at the opera, and poses beneath the Arc de Triomphe. The photographs will travel the world. But the generals accompanying him notice something the cameras don't capture. Hitler is exhilarated. They are not. As the Führer marvels at the architecture, Rundstedt walks a few steps behind, eyes scanning rooftops. Blumentritt watches the faces of Parisians kept at a distance by guards. Manstein studies the streets, already thinking about what happens when admiration fades and reality sets in. At one point, Hitler turns and says, "To think Paris is ours." Rundstedt inclines his head, "Yes, my Führer." But later, privately, he tells Blumentritt, "A city like this is never truly owned." That night, after Hitler had left, the generals reconvened. The mood is darker now. "The Führer believes this is the end," Küchler says flatly. "And it is not," Manstein replies. They discuss intelligence from London, from Bordeaux, from North Africa. They speak of a French general broadcasting calls to continue the fight, of British resolve hardening, not weakening. Paris, they realize, has become a symbol, but not only of German victory. It is also a symbol of French survival. Halder writes again, "History may judge this moment differently than we do today." That sentence will haunt him, because even now, even in triumph, the generals sense a shift. The war has changed shape. Blitzkrieg has reached its limit, not militarily, but psychologically.
Paris did not collapse in flames. It endured. And endurance, the German generals know all too well, is how wars are truly won or lost. Outside, night settles over the city. Lights glow behind curtains. Somewhere, a piano plays softly, a song from another time. The generals listen, each in his own way, and begin to understand that this silent city is not defeated. It is waiting, waiting for a moment, waiting for a mistake. And when that moment comes, Paris will remember exactly who it is. The first mistake comes quietly. June 19, 1940, 6:40 a.m. A German patrol marches down Rue Saint-Denis, boots echoing between narrow walls. A Feldwebel notices it first, a scrap of paper pasted to a lamppost. He stops, peels it off. 3 words written in careful block letters. La France continue. France continues. The Feldwebel crumples the paper, glances up and down the street. Windows are closed, doors shut, no witnesses, or so it seems. By noon, similar notices are found across the city. Nothing dramatic, no slogans calling for violence, just statements, quiet, defiant, impossible to prosecute. German military police file reports. General von Küchler reads them and exhales slowly. "So it begins," he says. The occupation machinery starts turning in earnest. Curfews imposed, newspapers censored, radios confiscated, orders printed in flawless French, posted neatly at every major intersection. The generals insist on discipline. They know the danger of arrogance. A single looted shop, a single drunken soldier could ignite the city. And yet, restraint feels like weakness. A staff officer remarks, "We are conquering with one hand tied." Rundstedt replies sharply, "Then keep it tied. Paris is watching."
Every decision now carries symbolic weight. Which cafe may reopen? Which theater may operate? Which bridge remains open to civilian traffic? Paris becomes a chessboard where every square is political. In private, German generals argue over policy. Some demand harsher measures, visible force to remind the population who rules. Others urge caution, warning that repression will only sharpen resistance. Manstein sides with caution. They want us to overreact. The city surrendered itself intact so that every bruise afterwards would be our doing. This idea gains traction. German patrols increase but remain rigidly professional. Helmets polished, weapons clean, orders were obeyed to the letter. Still, the tension rises.
Civilians begin subtle tests. A tram conductor forgets to stop for German passengers. A baker miscounts change, always short when the customer wears field gray. Street signs are turned slightly, just enough to confuse. None of it is enough to punish. All of it is enough to irritate. A major slams his fist on a desk during a briefing. They mock us. Rundstedt responds coldly. They remind us. On June 22nd, France signed the armistice at Compiègne. Officially, the war in the West is over. Officially, Germany has won. In Paris, the reaction is muted. German generals wait for the celebration. They do not get it. Instead, black armbands appear on civilians. Not en masse, one here, one there. Enough to notice, not enough to arrest. Halder receives word of this and writes, "The French have lost the campaign, not the war." The occupation grows heavier. Posters multiply, restrictions tighten, food becomes scarcer, lines lengthen. German officers begin to feel the weight Küchler predicted, the city as an anchor. Every ton of bread must be accounted for. Every train schedule is coordinated. Every police action is justified. Paris consumes resources at a rate no battle ever could. One evening, Blumentritt walks through a dimly lit square. He hears laughter from a nearby apartment, soft, genuine, defiant in its normalcy. He pauses, listening. "They live," he murmurs, and living, he knows, is a form of resistance. The first arrests come soon after, not for violence, but for words, leaflets, conversations overheard, radios hidden in closets. Each arrest is small. Together, they form a pattern. The generals notice another shift as well, among their own men. Soldiers who had marched in triumph now complain of unease. "I'd rather be at the front. At least there the enemy shoots back."